What's going on, guys? Apathetic here with all your tips, recommendations, and everything in between. And today, the new TWAB, or This Week at Bungie, finally revealed some of the major sandbox changes that are be coming to Destiny 2 in Season of the Worthy, or as it's being called right now, Season of the Redacted. So we're going to cover all that in this video today. Let's get into it. In this week's TWAB, Bungie jumps in by mentioning that multiple things are on the table for tweaking in this coming sandbox update, and that includes damage values, ranges, and even reload canceling. They go on to mention that some of these changes are being made for new PvE challenges and a new Nightfall difficulty called Grandmaster. Sounds interesting. Now, if you guys are looking to read everything Bungie says in this TWAB, you can read the full thing on your own, but what I'm going to focus on are the sandbox changes that are going to impact the PvP side of the game the most. Alright, so we're starting with a big one, guys, and that's Lord of Wolves. This weapon has been plaguing the Crucible for a long time now, and it's gone through a couple iterations, and for this next one, it's interesting. In the TWAB, it states, the ease of use granted by changes to released wolves made it very difficult to approach and made the margin of error extremely large. We pushed the two states apart via accuracy to ensure that the default state is the norm rather than the exception. With this change, released wolves should be used at extremely close ranges against large targets instead of just being a better version of the default behavior. So to sum it up, released wolves now significantly reduces this weapon's accuracy while active. This change, I think on the face of it, sounds really good, and I think most of you would agree with me that any change is good for this perk, but it'll be interesting to see what the effective range of released wolves will be. Based on how they are kind of describing it, I'm hoping that's something that you really have to be up close on someone for this perk to be as effective as it is currently. But I would say overall, I like this change because you're creating certain use cases for this perk versus having a perk that is good for almost any scenario. Next up, we have the last word, and I didn't really expect this gun to be here, guys, but I guess I should have. Getting into the changes, Bungie states that when reintroduced in the Season of the Forge, the last word became quite dominant due to its extremely forgiving maximum time to kill. We're adjusting the way the weapon works to focus it back as a hipfire based weapon, while also improving that side of the experience for both controller and mouse and keyboard inputs. We also made it a little less forgiving so that you still have to concentrate on your aim while wielding the weapon. Basically, Bungie is trying to refocus this weapon back to hip firing like they had intended. As we're about to cover, these changes really reflect that. So fan firing now adjusts to precision scaling while hip firing. Fan fire impact values have been adjusted. Precision hip ADS adjusted from 67.95 and 67.95 to 68.27 and 52.2. So just starting off, the ADS damage has been reduced significantly for precision shots. So going down from 67.95 how it is now to 52.2. So already a huge change in the way you're going to use this weapon. It's going to do more damage hip firing, and it's really, again, is already highlighting that focus on hip firing. Moving on though, non-precision hip ADS adjusted from 50.01 and 50.01 to 38 and 38. So basically, this thing got a huge damage nerf, and the fact that this thing could body shot for 50 damage was insane. So this thing's time to kill has just gone up significantly, and it's going to be a weapon that you're going to have to focus a lot more on hip firing, and it's going to be used in a lot more specific scenarios versus right now you could hip fire, but ADSing is just such a strong way to use this weapon, specifically on mouse and keyboard. Moving on to the next part though, aiming down sights no longer provides additional effective range or damage fall off. Reduced stability for mouse and keyboard input, which is pretty interesting. So they're trying to make it a little bit more similar for mouse and keyboard users and console users. So you're gonna feel some of that that kick when you're firing probably. Reduce the effective range to improve the experience, adjust to the way target acquisition is handled while hip firing. Wow, guys, huge changes to the last word and how effective it's going to be at range and when it comes to ADSing. They're really bringing back and focusing, like they stated, on that hip fire fantasy with this weapon, kind of running gun hip fire playstyle. And based on the damage values you're seeing here, it's going to really behoove you, I guess I would say, to hip fire versus ADS. ADS is going to be a lot less effective, and so it's going to really force you to play within a certain range, on this weapon. Overall, I would say I'm a big fan of this change because, man, Last Word just melts so hard, especially on PC when you don't have the current stability issues that looks like they're bringing. So no hit to stability, and the ADS, like, you do the same exact damage as when you're hip firing, and so you just melt people so quickly, especially if you're hitting crits. So really excited to see this change. It's going to force this weapon to be used in a lot closer range and with hip fire, which is going to innately make it less accurate and less deadly. How much will this weapon still be used? That'll be remain to see. This might be a very hard nerf to where Last Word completely falls off, but we'll hold off on calling that until we see it in the wild once this update drops. Moving on, we now have shotguns. Oh God, not my babies. Don't touch my babies. Getting into what Bungie says, one issue we've been waiting to fix before adjusting shotguns again was an oddity in the way our aim assist system works with weapons that don't care much about precision damage. As an example for shotguns, at certain distances between players, the aim assist system would prioritize the head, causing the entire spread to deviate from center mass and make the player miss out on the kill. With that issue out the way, we made more adjustments to shotguns to give other weapons a little more time to react to them. Okay, interesting. So it sounds like the aim assist was causing some of the spread to miss. So let's get into their bullet points here. Target acquisition for non-slug shotguns has been adjusted to no longer account for precision locations. Previously, target acquisition could actually cause the player's spread to deviate from the intended aim vector, causing most of the spread to miss. Cone angle is now adjusted on a per sub archetype basis and is no longer adjusted by the range stat. Aiming down sights no longer adjusts effective range for this weapon archetype. So this is pretty interesting that they would make this kind of change. It's awesome to hear that they found what was causing the spread to be off. So what I'm hoping, and I'm sure Fallout Plays, he does tons of videos on shotguns, is going to be doing a more in-depth review on this, but it sounds like shotguns are going to be a lot more consistent with this because the spread is not going to be being pulled up by the aim assist from, you know, trying to go for the game trying to push it into precision damage. So when you aim center mass, all the pellets should go center mass. So hopefully this makes shotguns more consistent, because it sounds like that range is not, the cone angle is not adjusted by range, and aiming down sights no longer affects the range of this weapon. So it makes me wonder two things. One, is range not the go-to stat on shotguns anymore? And two, aiming down sights no longer affects it. So is hip firing just going to be the way to go? Is it not going to matter at all to aim down sights? So for things like full choke, where aiming down sights makes the pellet spread tighter, is that going to be the go-to perk still? I don't know. Tons of questions in my mind are generated for this, but I think I like that shotguns are going to be more consistent. I will take a slight nerf to the range if I know my shotgun's going to be more consistent, because part of the reason as a PvP player you wanted more range on your shotgun is to make it more consistent and hopefully more consistently one-shot kill from further distances. But if you're going to take that distance away from me but make my shotgun more consistent, by all means, I'm cool with that. And if it keeps shotguns a little bit more in their lane without completely nerfing their damage, I love that. I like this change. It sounds really good. I'm gonna be really interested to see what it's like once it's implemented and how shotguns perform. But overall, this is an exciting change, and I think this will allow primaries to breathe a little bit more. Next up, we got another heavy hitter, fusion rifles. Big hot topic for a while in the community. So jumping into this, similar to the issues noted above with shotguns, fusion rifles also suffered from some target acquisition related oddities that we since fixed. Most of the changes here are adjustments focusing on the high impact sub archetype. Backup Plan was an exotic perk in the original Destiny release and was placed on legendary fusion rifles in Destiny 2 due to them being heavy ammo weapons at the time rather than the special ammo weapons they currently are. When weapons were shuffled around in Forsaken, the perk came along with them, and we've decided to adjust it along the archetype itself to have it fall back in line with other legendary perks. Target acquisition for fusion rifles has been adjusted to no longer account for precision locations. Previously, target acquisition could actually cause the player's volley to deviate from the intended aim vector, causing most of the volley to miss. I could disagree with that based on how far I've been killed with fusion rifles lately. Damage fall off for this weapon archetype can now floor at 0.5 times, previously was 0.75 times. Effective range and the impact of the optic stat for this weapon archetype has been reduced across the board. Hallelujah! So giant range nerf, well, not about giant, but range nerf for fusions across the board. Next we got backup plan. Backup plan now adjusts impact to match the rapid fire sub archetype while active. Charge time is now set to match the rapid fire sub archetype, so 0.85 while active. So it sounds like it'll still charge quicker, but it's gonna take on the impact of a rapid fire sub archetype. So before backup plan, you would proc it and it's just basically shooting almost instantly, but it has the same impact, especially if you're using Erentil, which is a high impact fusion rifle. Now with backup plan, when you proc it, it's going to adjust its impact to match the rapid fire archetype, so it's going to do less damage, and so people aren't going to be able to absolutely map you with it. And again, it's kind of narrowing the scope of how effective and when backup plan will be effective, and so the chances are of it also one-shotting you, even if you're pushing up on someone they switch to it, are now lower. So now backup plan will still be good, but it's not going to be OP, borderline uncounterable like it is now. I think this is a nice middle ground versus I was like, man, I think they should just remove backup plan, but this is a nice way to kind of keep it in the game, keep this perk available, respect people who grinded for this perk, and keep it still useful and make people still want it, but not make it crazy OP to where it's like the perk you have to have. So I'm pretty happy with this change. I think it's a nice middle ground. And last but certainly not least is auto rifle. So some small tweaks have been made to give auto rifles a small boost in efficacy for the crucible, though they are also influenced in PvE. The nature of the way Destiny is played tends to have semi-auto based weaponry be more effective in general, and so we're compensating for that with these tweaks. These are fairly modest changes intended to give auto rifles more of a chance in an open fight without attempting to drag the TTK of the entire game down. So the following impact values have changed. So high impact frame is now 22 and 35.2, so for precision, when previously it was 22 and 33. For precision frame auto rifles, it's 17 and 27.2, when previously it was 17 and 25.5. Adaptive frame, 15.75 and 25.2, when previously it was 13.75 and 22. Rapid fire frame, 13.4 and 20.1. Previously it was 12.5 and 18.75. So across the board, you're seeing all these auto rifles archetypes being buffed by, one or two, points of damage, which is nice. And this I think is good because auto rifles have needed some love lately. I think this is gonna make Hardlight pretty good. Hardlight, I feel like with the recent changes has already been something I'm really enjoyed. I just did a recent video on it, so I'm gonna be excited to see how Hardlight falls in this. I think Suros is gonna make a big comeback, and I don't think these weapons will be meta, but I think if there's a quest or something where you have to do auto rifles, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be a little bit easier. But overall, guys, I'm pretty happy with this TWAB and the changes Bungie is making, especially with trials on the horizon. You definitely don't want to have shotguns, Erentil, Lord of Wolves all running amok, and I think these changes are all good and fair changes. I don't think anything's getting drastically nerfed. The only thing I'm kind of concerned about in terms of the nerf is the last word. I feel like the last word definitely was deserving of a nerf, but again, I feel like we'll see how this pans out and how usable it is in a hip fire scenario and what the range looks like. But I think it's going to be a little bit jarring for people who are used to ADSing with the last word, especially on mouse and keyboard. I think it's going to be a lot less effective, but to have a weapon that's that strong and having such a high body shot damage it would have been a problem in trials, I think. So overall, I think it's something they had to do. I'm glad they did it. Let me know in the comments though, what do you guys think of these changes? What did you like? What didn't you like? Is there anything you feel they didn't address? For me, I'm a little disappointed they didn't address 110 and 140 hand cannons. I would have liked to see some changes or talk about that. So hopefully that's coming a little bit later, because they've talked about some things here are the biggest changes, but not everything. So hopefully that's coming down the line, or if anything, it'll be on their radar shortly. But let me know in the comments, guys, what do you think of these changes and what do you feel was missing? With that, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.